at Quinsigamond Community College. We appreciate all that you do on behalf of the students and in service to each other. So this morning, our day will be from 9 o'clock now until approximately 11:45 when we'll adjourn. The offices will open again after all college days. So we've tried to create a day that demonstrates our appreciation for each other, that is also informative, and as the start of the semester, we hope it's also inspirational to carry us through. I would ask that you remember that today is September 4th, and this is be political, but I have a request to remind you to please vote on the furniture that's up in the foyer area. So, and also there's something else going on in the Commonwealth that you might want to pay attention to. So, but please vote on which furniture you find most appealing, and it's located in the foyer of the auditorium. So we'll begin today with a keynote presentation. We'll have a short break. Dr. Pedraja will speak with us. You'll hear about innovative, creative activities that have been going on all summer. We'll have some questions and answers, and then we'll have the opportunity to recognize those among us who have achieved greatness during when we weren't listening, or maybe we were listening, but we'll recognize people during that time. It seems to me that we have a little bit of conflict of information this morning. The calendar says it's fall, but the thermometer says it's still summer. So, we'll have to just go with that. And so, this stage does not happen without the input and the assistance of almost everyone in every area of the college community. I particularly want to thank the members of the College Day Committee, Beth Austin, Amy Bowdry, Selena Bowdry, Deborah Flash, Kathy French, Kathy Suey, and Michelle Fry. We've been working on this day since last February. So we hope that you find it informative and beneficial. Best all right. I was up at 4 this morning, John. Don't tell my husband. Anyway, so thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here and for joining us in this day of looking towards the future. Recently we celebrated the 50th anniversary, and now we're looking to the next 50 years of Quinsigamond's life. This morning, I'm pleased to be with you and also to be able to introduce our guest speaker, Attorney Valerie Zalezi Wyndham. Attorney Zalezi Wyndham was born in Mexico City and has lived in France and in various parts of the United States. She is both a graduate of Boston College with a degree in political science and French literature, and she has received a certificate from the School of Management at Boston College. She is a graduate of Boston University School of Law, and she has over 20 years of professional experience in the for-profit and not-for-profit sectors. She's been on the front lines. She's been in management at large legal aid program, and she served on various nonprofit boards of directors. She is fluent in English, Spanish, and French. She has served as the managing attorney for Community Legal Aid. She served as the Director of Training and Professional Development for the Legal Aid Assistance Corporation of Central Massachusetts, and she has served as the Regional Training Director for Center for Legal Aid Education. She has also served as the Chairwoman of the Board of Directors at the Edward Kennedy Community Health Center. She is a corporator and member of the Grants Committee of the Greater Worcester Community Foundation, and she is a board member of the Worcester County Food Bank. As founder of Promoting Good, a consulting company located in Massachusetts, she's a skilled advocate, a project manager, a facilitator, a coach, a trainer, and a relationship builder. She has co-founded a thriving medical legal partnership and has successfully designed and secured funding for several other multi-partner programs that are advancing social justice. She has a deep passion for helping organizations build sustainable diversity, equity, and inclusion, because the organizations in the communities they serve, she understands, will be stronger. Her career to date has focused on advancing social justice and health equities through advocacy and intersective collaboration with the goal of implementing preventive strategies that successfully tackle the negative barriers that prevent communities and individuals from thriving. She has a great understanding of all the necessary elements of building diversity, equity, and inclusion that we have highlighted in areas of our strategic plan. She has a great appreciation of what it will take to make QCC an institution looking towards the future. Finally, she's also a fascinating individual, and we're all in for a treat today. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Attorney Valerie Zalesny to the podium.
Good morning, everybody. How are you? So that was a lot of information. A little overwhelming. I'll start with just a little bit of a more personal introduction. So I was born in Mexico City, but I may not be what you imagine when you think of sort of a Mexican immigrant. I don't have an accent, and that's one because I'm perhaps linguistically skilled, but also because I learned English as a young child. I've lived in the United States since, well, I guess as an adult, since 1996, and have been a citizen of this country since 2002, the same year I became an attorney. And so I consider myself Mexican, but I also consider myself American, although I don't sort of identify with the label Mexican American, because that sort of was not my personal experience. It is really a pleasure for me to be here with you today. I have been in Central Massachusetts since 2002, and really love Worcester, love Greater Worcester, and really have cared for, as a lawyer, many of your students and their families. And so it's really a privilege for me to be here today sharing some thoughts about how you can support your learners who have so much to contribute to our community. My title is Inclusion Ignites Success, and I think that is true for your learners, but it's also true for you, because I believe that all of us are learning, even if we are the teachers. So I want to start with this picture, which is of a, well, what is it? Somebody shout out, what are you looking at? Yeah. So this is one of the most diverse ecosystems that exists in our universe. And I think it's beautiful. And what makes it beautiful? That it's diverse. And what does that mean? It means that it is made up of a lot of different things. So that's what diversity is. Today, sort of in our time, we hear about diversity in the context of sort of race and ethnicity, but diversity is just about difference being in a space together. And so I think this is just a beautiful, beautiful image. And Claude Monet, who's an amazing artist, he talked about the richness that in his art, which comes from nature, which is extraordinarily diverse, just like our human races. This is a wonderful painting of dusk in Venice, but it really could be anywhere. And I like to start with this image because it, you know, if you are looking at a sunrise or at a sunset, you know, you might, if you look really quickly, just see one color. But if you're looking more closely, and with more sort of nuanced eyes, you're going to see that that sunset or that sunrise is made up of a lot of different things, and that it is all of those different colors together which make it beautiful. And so that's what diversity is, and that's what diversity does. So I encourage you to think about the diversity that is all around you in this room, in your student populations, in our local community, and because it's what makes magic happen. Now, another view at diversity. So this is a painting that is actually of 500 hearts. So, which may be hard for you to see from where you're sitting. But what makes it beautiful, right, is that it's the same image, right, a heart, but each of them is a little bit different. And that's what makes this wonderful image. And it wouldn't be as interesting if it was just a red heart in the center, right, or a pink heart in the center. What makes it special is that you're bringing together lots of pieces, sort of like all of you here in this room, who come together as a community of faculty and staff at QCC to do the great work that you do on behalf of your students. So I want to talk now about inclusion. And I think inclusion is very, very important because diversity just means that you have difference in the room. And again, that difference doesn't have to be racial or ethnic. That difference can be skill set, language. And so diversity alone is not enough to achieve greatness. But inclusion is extraordinarily important. So what is inclusion? If you look at this chart here, you have a few circles, the biggest one, which I can name A, B, and C. If you look at C, that is not inclusion, right? So if you have a classroom and you have perhaps different kinds of people in the room, but they are each segregated, then you don't have inclusion. You don't have real dialogue. You don't have sort of the intersection of people engaging together and learning together. If you look at A, there's sort of the start of inclusion. But what I hope that we can all be working towards is thinking about how do we come together so that we really are working in an environment where we have true inclusion. Because if you have true inclusion, then your rich conversation, it includes all of these different viewpoints, each of which is unique, each of which is special, and they all build upon each other. And that's what creates magic. Now, I was just in Mexico, so I live here now, but my family is all still there, and so I go every summer. And I go in part to see my brother and my mother and my father and my grandparents. But I also go in part because there's a bit of my soul that still lives there. And so I was there last month, walking through this botanical garden, which was just phenomenal. And I ran across this garden that they named in the future. So these artists actually picked through some, really terrible dumps in Mexico, which are very, very big, upon which people live. And they took tons and tons of plastic. And out of that plastic, they created this beautiful, beautiful garden. And so what makes this garden special, right, is that there is thousands and thousands of different types of recycled plastic, different shapes, different initial objects. And they come together to replicate basically a beautiful flower garden. And that's what inclusion is. And I believe that this is something that we all can achieve in wherever we are working, whether you are working with students, whether you're working with faculty, whether you're working to make sure that the things that need to happen for students here at QCC can happen. Whatever team you're a part of, an inclusive team is going to be stronger. There we go. Now, I talked briefly about diversity and about inclusion. So there are racial and ethnic differences. And of course, there are lots of other differences, but today I'm going to focus on sort of race and ethnicity. But I think it's important to start by saying that we are all one human race. So we have differences, and I'll describe them in a minute, but I want to start with this. So whenever I'm traveling, or even not traveling, just wandering about, I love seeing children tantrum. Why? Well, as long as they're not my own, right? Or I'm not responsible for them. The reason I think a tantrum is so beautiful is that you see a child who is 2, and it doesn't matter what that child looks like, where that child is from, what language that child speaks. The tantrum is universal. And why is that? Because we are human. We are more similar than we are different. In fact, 99% of sort of our being, of our brain, of our bodies is the same. And so these differences that make us look different, they really are just a tiny piece of who we are. And the differences are extraordinarily important, and we're going to spend a lot of time this morning talking about that. But I think it's really important to acknowledge that in fact we are all human. We are all almost the same. And I think important to acknowledge, because part of the history of racism in this country and across the world comes from a different understanding, of some people thinking that we are more different than we are like, that some of us are better than others because of what we look like, because of the color of our skin. And so I think this is really, really important. And you may all not love the tantrum, but it doesn't matter where I am, I see it and I'm just reminded, right, that we are all human. All right, so what is race and what is ethnicity? I'm actually going to just define them for you because it's important to know definitions. So one, race. So race, it is primarily about your physical characteristics. Okay, so the color of your skin, the shape of your eyes, the texture of your hair, that is what makes up race. Okay? Ethnicity, which often is sort of mixed up with race, but is actually a very different thing, that's about culture, that's about social group. So for example, I consider myself a Latina woman because I'm from Mexico, I speak Spanish, that is my ethnic background. That is not my race. Race is something very different. So you can be both a Latina and identify racially, or identify racially with more than one racial group. But they are very different things, and I think sometimes we mix them up, and even the census mixes them up. But I think the distinction is very, very important. I am Mexican, but I can only speak for myself, right? I do not identify with every Mexican woman, definitely don't identify with every Latina woman, because we each come from different countries, different cultures, and different races. And so understanding that nuance is very, very important, right? All right. Moving on to more challenging terminology, which I think is really important to talk about as well. I want to differentiate between bias and racism, okay? We're going to be spending a little bit of time playing some games, which are going to get you to think a little bit about the bias that we each have, and that can be scary, because you might learn something about yourself that you didn't know. And so I want to differentiate between racism and bias. If we had more time together, there's a lot of overlap that can happen between these two, but for this conversation, we're going to sort of put them into two different categories. So what is racism? One, racism can actually either be individual or it can be institutional. But racism is that overt thought, right? That is the I think I'm better than you because because I'm white and you're black, or, because I'm Mexican and you're something else. It's about your overt feelings and beliefs about one group over another group. And it tends to be, tied with prejudice, with hatred, with negative thoughts, right? Feelings of superiority. That's what racism is. Now, it operates at an individual level because we're each humans, right? And we have some of those thoughts. Some people do. But it also operates at an institutional level. Now, why is that? Because, of course, individuals create institutions. And those institutions thrive over time, right? The United States has a difficult history with oppression of many different groups, slavery, post-slavery issues, African, Native American issues. And so there is a history that has built sort of institutional racism into many systems within our society. So that's what racism is. Implicit bias is actually something very different. Implicit bias, and who here, by just show of hands, has heard of the term implicit bias? Right. Who has taken an implicit association test? A few other people. All right. I encourage you to think about taking implicit association test. So implicit bias, this is very different to racism in that it's about what is happening inside our minds, and my mind as well, all of our minds in this room and everywhere else in this world, that we are not controlling. So our brains actually are acting all of the time, and thank goodness, right? If we had to make every single decision before arriving here this morning, we would already be needing a nap, right? So our brain protects us and makes a lot of decisions without us even knowing that that is happening. And because of the society that we live in, some of the things that sit within that brain that we activate unintentionally create bias. Now that bias can be positive, it can be negative, but it exists, and it is happening in all of us, a little bit differently, because each of our experiences is a little bit different, right? My experience perhaps particularly unique because I grew up in Mexico, and so some of my sort of initial memories are probably different to yours, right? I sort of didn't see the taco shell, the hard taco shell. It's not a real taco, right? Until I was a teenager. And so when people say taco, like that's not what comes to my mind. And so, you know, we each have sort of a unique way in which we see the world. But that automatic brain activity is happening. And we think we control it, but actually we don't. All right. So we're going to play a game. I'm going to turn to the next slide, and I want you to just say loudly together as a group what you read on the screen. What did the yellow All right. So I think you all said, what did the yellow dog do to the blue chicken? Now, is any single word up there spelled correctly? No. But you still were able to read it. And I would say probably within 2 seconds, right? So why is that? Because you learned to read when you were little, right? Or most of us learned to read when we were little. And so you know what the words should look like. And your brain is actually basically doing a puzzle and instantly correcting so that you are saying the word correctly, even with that mistake. Okay? So that's your brain. Now, did you tell your brain to do it? No, right? We just did it. So that's your brain operating without you directing it, and like that. Okay? All right. So now I'm going to ask you to read the 2 words that you see next.
Yellow, blue.
All right. So some of us are right-brained, some of us are left-brained, right? So you see the word yellow, and you know, it's not yellow. And then you see the word blue and it's yellow, right? So depending on sort of what kind of person you are, these exercises might be harder for you than others, but your brain is sort of like, what's going on here, right? Because it's not seeing what it thinks it should be seeing. And again, that's your brain sort of without you directing it, trying to do a few things. All right. Now, if we were in a smaller group, I'd bring somebody up. These are 2 tables. Are they the same or are they different? Somebody said the same. Does anybody think they're different? Yes? Okay. So I just finished training 400 people in these small group sessions, and I can tell you that in each of those 20 to 25 group sessions, maybe 2 people in the room thought they were the same. They are the same. By my second training, we had a seamstress who actually pulled out her yardstick to measure them because she could not believe that they were the same. Now, why is that? Because you're seeing these images that are placed differently on this screen. And so your brain, and our brains are incredible, right? They actually can see this in a 3D, like they're seeing this table in 3D form in front of your eyes, like your brain is imagining that happening. And because they're placed differently on that screen, you think that they're different. But if we took out a yardstick and we measured them, the short end on both of the tables is exactly the same and the long end is exactly the same. Now, what's crazy is the first time this happened to me, when the woman took out her measuring tape, I started panicking. I was like, oh my God, what if I'm wrong, right? Like, that's crazy, right? Because obviously I wouldn't have used this thing if I didn't know that it worked, right? Would not be wise. But that is how strong our brains are in directing our thought and in sort of controlling what we feel and what we do and what we say. That even though I know intellectually that they are the same, my brain just wants to believe the first thing that it thought and to believe that that initial impression is correct. And that is what bias is, okay? All right, so far, none of these games have caused us any distress, hopefully. But it gets more complicated the more personal things get. So where does bias come from, particularly our racial and our ethnic bias, which we all have? So we are constantly seeing images, and we saw images this morning before we started. You listen to the radio maybe on your way here, or even commercials on the radio in your car. You watch TV, and you are getting images thrown at you all the time. We all are. And those images, even if we're hearing things that we don't like, and I can say presently there are things I hear about Mexicans, for example, that make me cringe. But whether I want to accept those things as fact or not, they are entering my brain and they are impacting how I view the world. And so the media stereotypes that we have, things that we hear about in our community, racial, ethnic turmoil, hate speech, all of those types of things. Our family dynamics growing up, our school dynamics growing up, all of those things are entering our brain, and they are absolutely impacting how we see the world. To give an example, there was the Barbie girls are bad at math disaster, right, that Mattel had a few years ago. Terrible idea, right? And where did that come from? The stereotype that girls are bad at math, right? And my daughter is a gifted mathematician, and we are constantly saying to her, you are great at math. And why are we doing that? Because we know that she might be hearing out in the world that girls are not good at math, right? And that she maybe should think about doing something else. And so those stereotypes, whether they're gendered, whether they're racial, whether they're social, impact us and impact how we feel, decisions that we make, all of those things. And so being aware of that is really important. But all of that is what makes up the bias. All right. So I'm going to show you a slide with some words, and I want you to I'm going to say the words out loud. You can look at the slide or not. But I want you to, for a second, imagine what the descriptor describes, okay? So a doctor, like imagine a doctor. What do you see? Most of us are seeing a white man. Whether we want to or not, that is a common thing that is happening. A firefighter, right? Big, strong, bulky guy. A nurse. Most of us are probably imagining a woman. And a CEO. Most of us are probably imagining a white man. Now, I'm not saying that those stereotypes are good, but there's stereotypes that are out there, and they, again, enter our brain, enter our experience. And being aware of those stereotypes is really, really important. And I think I can feel the discomfort here.